Hello, today we'll do a lesson called the Kannada English Combat by the famous professor of Bangalore University, Dr. Nagaraj. So, the title of the lesson means that there is a combat between Kannada and English. Combat not in the sense of an outright quarrel saying that either Kannada should be removed or English should be removed from the syllabus of a university, but rather the word combat in the title means that there is an effort made by Kannada speaking people to learn English, the effort or the striving or the trying to learn English. So, uh, the author says, Rangaswamy is an old friend of mine, a boyhood pal, in fact. He has not studied much. He has passed his secondary school and works in a private company in the Chickpet area of Bangalore. So, many of the essays of Professor Nagaraj, Dr. Nagaraj, have two characters, with himself as a third. The two characters are Rangaswamy, who is a Kannadiga. He knows a lot of Kannada. And the other is Shiv Shankar, who is well versed in English. And the third friend is the author himself. So Rangaswamy, Shiv Shankar, and the author often have a conversation about many topics. So here we given a description of the author's friend Rangaswamy. We're told that Rangaswamy is an old friend of the author's. He was a boyhood friend, and he's finished his SSLC, school leaving certificate, and works in a private company in the Chickpet area of Bangalore. He has three young children and is educating them in an English medium school with great difficulty. So Rangaswamy has three children and he's put them in an English medium school, and he finds it difficult to pay the fees and for three children, and also at the same time look after all the other expenses of the household. So he is managing with great difficulty. Uh, Raising loans now and then. So every now and then Rangaswamy takes a loan to cover the expenses. Since he is deeply interested in social and political issues, we argue over dozens of issues every time we meet. So Rangaswamy is interested in political and social issues. Social means of society, issues in society. So the author argues with Rangaswamy every time they meet. Rangaswamy, who comes from a backward caste, is always contemplating ways of uplifting his lot. So Rangaswamy comes from the backward caste, so he's always thinking about raising his status, raising his income, raising his level of comfort and luxury. He's always thinking about uplifting his lot. His lot means what has come to him in life. This was the gist of an argument he has put forward on depressed classes and English when we met the other day. So, what follows is an argument that Rangaswamy put to the author about the depressed classes, suppressed classes, lower classes, Dalits. So the relation between Dalits and English, Rangaswamy put forward an argument when they met. People from backward classes should send their children only to English medium schools. So Rangaswamy's point of view is that people from the lower classes, caste, should send their children only to English medium schools. Knowledge of English forms the basis of economic progress and social dominance of upper caste. So Rangaswamy thinks that a knowledge of English forms the basis of economic progress. So he is right in a way because English is the medium of instruction. English is the lingua franca of global business, of global science, global commerce, etc. If you know English, you can make yourself understood anywhere in the world. So, knowledge of English forms the basis of economic progress as well as the social dominance of upper caste. So, the upper caste know English. That is why they are able to dominate the lower caste, according to Rangaswamy. So, English is inevitable for the emancipation of the lowest of lower castes. So, English cannot, we need a knowledge of English. A knowledge of English is inevitable, it cannot be avoided for the emancipation. Emancipation means for the freedom of the lowest of the lower caste. Those who argue in favor of Kannada medium of instruction either do not have a clear understanding of social upliftment or take such a view knowing the the consequence of lower caste staying tied to Kannada. So there are two classes of people who argue for Kannada as the medium of instruction, not only as the medium of instruction, as the only medium of instruction. So one class who argue for Kannada only as a medium of instruction do not have a clear understanding of social upliftment because progress, improvement in status, improvement in the lot of one's life depends on a knowledge of English because most of the activities are tied to the language. So they do not have a clear understanding of social upliftment or take such a view knowing well the consequences of lower caste staying tied to Kannada. So the second class of people who argue only for Kannada as the only medium of instruction know the consequences of the lower caste staying tied to Kannada. They will remain in the lower caste. That may be one of the consequences of not knowing English. This is not a new argument, says the author. One powerful faction of the Shudra movement has always taken this line. So, the Shudra movement, uh, ದಲಿತ ಕಾವ್ಯ ದಲಿತ ಪ್ರಬಂಧಗಳು ದಲಿತ ಕಾವ್ಯಗಳು ದಲಿತ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ the Shudras, one powerful faction of Dalit literature, those who write Dalit literature have always taken this line. For example, this was the argument of one of Karnataka's influential leaders, the late Basolingappa. So the late Basolingappa argued that Kannada should be the only medium of instruction. Several leaders of Shudra and other low castes have articulated the same sentiments in either more more sophisticated or cruder forms. So the Shudras not only argue that Kannada should be the medium of instruction, they also argue that English should be given equal importance for the Dalits. So one of the people who argued for English to be taught to the lower caste as a means of social upliftment was the late Baswalingappa, and others of the lower caste have articulated the same sentiments in more sophisticated or cruder forms. In fact, this is not uh, this is not this is not only reflected in intellectual positions taken by political movements, but is visible reality in every small town and village in Karnataka. India is today a great hope and a dream. So the medium of instruction should be English. That is what all the lower caste leaders say. And this view has percolated down into every small town and village in Karnataka, and we see that people in every village and small town in Karnataka want English, want to learn English. It's a visible reality. So, English is the great hope. Learning English is a great hope and a dream, says the author. Last week, I had been to one of the taluk centers in Bangalore district. It was a typical small town with narrow roads and heaps of garbage everywhere. But two things there drew my attention. Every road in the town had a small eatery, and every second street had an English medium school. Bangalore too has a rash of these. So the author took a journey to one of the taluk centers on the outskirts of Bangalore. It was a small town, and like every small town in Karnataka, it had some narrow roads, and there were heaps of garbage everywhere. But the author noticed that every road in the town had a small restaurant, and every alternate street had an English medium school. Bangalore also has quite a number of restaurants and schools, English medium schools. What kind of English medium schools are these? Schools in the town I had been to were being run in small old houses. So in the Taluk center, the schools were being run in old houses. They didn't even look like schools. They did not have a playground. They did not have classrooms. These buildings could just as well be rack shops, brothels, city hotels, or places to play cards in stealth. So the houses in which these English medium schools were run, they could just as well have been arak shops. Arak is a type of country-made liquor. They could have been seedy hotels or just places to play cards in secret and gamble. So, but the poorest of families want to send their children only to these English medium schools. There is a huge rush to admit children here because English is believed to be the highway to great future. So people believe that English is the right royal road to a great future. English schools are projecting themselves as beacons of hope for the Dalit Bahujan people everywhere. So English medium schools uh, advertise themselves as light, rays of hope for the Dalits and the Bahujans, the lower caste. Our love of English is so blinding that there is hardly any room for any objective discussion on the issue. So, this is the mindset of the people. It is almost a magical mindset. English has taken hold of the minds of the people right from the lowest status, lowest strata to the highest strata. So they're being blinded and there's hardly any room for any objective discussion on whether English is all that it promises to be, or is there any other alternative possible. There's no objective discussion. There are no objective discussions on the issue. Since when has the English language begun to seem like a magician who can conjure up a great future? Asked the author. So, since when in history has English pretended to be like a magician or a conjurer who can prepare a bright future for everybody in the country? A look back at 150 years of our history throws light on how such a belief has come to be. So, when we look back in history, we understand how this almost magical mentality that English is the only way to a great future, we can understand its hold on our minds today if we look back 150 years of history. So, Ram Manohar Lohia identifies three principal characteristics of the upper class in India. So, Ram Manohar Lohia was a great freedom fighter, and he identifies three principal characteristics of the upper class in India. They own property, are from upper caste, and have access to English. So these upper class people, they have three characteristics. The three they are: they own property, they are from the upper caste, and have access to English. This means that one of the key means for the supremacy of upper class in is the English language. So one of the key factors of becoming an upper class person is the English language. So lower castes are rushing to acquire English, believing that the language carries some kind of innate power. So the lower caste believe that English by itself carries some sort of magical power. But it's not English as such, it is what a person does with his knowledge of English. With an adequate knowledge of English, with an adequate vocabulary of his subject, of his field in English, he can travel the world. He should be able to understand the relation between what is written in his textbook and what he's doing in his field of work, and he should be able to achieve um, a high level of proficiency in his work with his knowledge of English. That will make a person rise in society. It's not English as such, it is what we do with the knowledge of English. They believe that it can cast a magic spell that can transport them to a new heaven. So people believe that they have a magical mentality. They believe that English can cast a magic spell that can transport them to a new heaven. If you look at it from one point of view, there is some truth in this belief. So the author says there is some truth in this belief because English, as I said, is the lingua franca of practically every field of activity in the world, whether it's commerce, trade, science, literature, and so on and so forth. A person can make himself understood in any part of the world if he knows English. The historical relationship between Muslims and English is one illustration of the lack of the link between social mobility and political power. So the author considers the historical link between English and the link between social mobility and political power in relation to the Muslims. The animosity between the British and the Muslims reached a flashpoint after the revolt of 1857. So in 1857, there was a Sepoy mutiny, and this was the result of many years of build up of enmity between the British and the Muslims. This was a classic expression of the hostility between the Muslim community and the Western world, which continues to this day. So, even today, the hostility between the Muslim community and the Western world continues as we can see in the news. An important fallout of the 1857 revolt was that the Muslims as a community came to look upon not only Western culture but also the English language with suspicion and contempt. So, one of the results of the 1857 Sepoy Mutiny was that Muslims came to look not only on the Western culture of the British who were doing what they were doing with suspicion, but the Muslims also looked upon the English language itself as they looked at it with suspicion. The Hindu upper class, which identified itself with the colonial powers and the language they spoke, climbed the bureaucratic ladder with great ease and alacrity. So the upper classes who identified themselves with the colonial powers, with the British, they were given jobs in the government, in the bureaucracy, and they reached very high positions in the government service. The upper classes and the caste in India have historically been the first to learn uh, the language of power and use it for their upward mobility. This was true of Sanskrit, Persian, and many other languages. So the upper classes have always been uh, in the forefront of identifying themselves with any invaders. So they identified themselves with those who came from Persia to uh, conquer India. They all the other languages of the world. For example, the Portuguese, the upper classes always identified themselves with the conquerors, so they became upwardly mobile. The Muslim community fell into the deep abyss because of their contempt for English. The Muslim community, on the other hand, viewed English with suspicion, so they fell into a deep abyss. They were not given any positions in government. They were ostracized from society by the colonial powers, so they fell into a deep abyss or a hole. Muslims who had been influential during the Mughal rule uh, nearly disappeared from all the colonial bureaucratic structures. So there were virtually no Muslims employed in the colonial bureaucracy, in the colonial government. One can see the concern reflected in the writings and speeches of Syed Ahmad Khan, an important reformer. So there was a reformer called Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and in his speeches and writings we can see the concern that he had for the Muslims, and he tried to draw Muslims to English learning by establishing Aligarh Muslim University. So Sir Syed Ahmad Khan established the Aligarh University to try to draw Muslims to English. English was the language that bestowed power. English was the language that bestowed power in the new dispensation through the pen. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan says repeatedly that the pen is mightier than the sword. So English was the language of the new government, of the new colonial power through of the new dispensation. And Sir Syed says, don't fight them with swords because the pen is mightier than the sword. If you can convince people that through your writings that then you have a large number of people supporting you. Rather than take up arms against the colonial power, it's better to change the mindsets of the people through your writings, through your essays, through your poetry, and so on. Muslims who wanted to end the colonial power through the sword disappeared from the circle of power. But Muslims were insistent that they should fight the British with arms and weapons. So, what the result was that they were suppressed and they disappeared from the inner circles of power. The upper class Hindus who picked up the pen and wrote English gained prominence in the colonial hierarchical structures. So the upper class Hindus who picked up the pen and wrote English They gained importance in colonial structures, in the colonial government. So Sayed, who recognized that the new culture had brought with it a new power structure, tried to bridge the gap between Muslims and English. This was observed keenly by backward and Dalit leaders through the 19th and 20th centuries, and they drew their own lessons from it. So, whatever Sir Syed Ahmad Khan tried to do for the Muslims was observed keenly by the Dalit and other backward leaders through the 19th and 20th centuries, and they learned their own lessons uh, of the efforts of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. They came to believe that English alone was the route to their social, cultural, and political progress. So the Dalits and other backward leaders believed that a knowledge of English was alone the route to their social, cultural, and political progress in society. So, all over India, middle class leaders of movements from these sections zealously clung to English. So, all the Dalit leaders advocated a knowledge of English. So, all the Dalits, they industriously held on to English. They say that upper castes gained mobility because of English and insisted that it be made accessible to them. So Dalits insisted that the English language should be accessible by them. The entire country swiftly embraced an education system geared to produce clerks. So the whole country learnt English, but the British had another trick up their sleeve. That is, the entire set of Indians who learnt English became an army of pen pushers. They became a set of clerks for the East India Company. This experience, uh, this experience guides Shudra and Dalit sections argument in favor of English to this day. So to this day, the lower caste sections of society advocate English language learning. This is behind my friend Rangaswamy's persistent faith in English. So this is why the author's friend Rangaswamy insists that his children learn English. I should tell you about my other friend Shiv Shankar. He has studied business management in the prestigious Harvard University and now holds a big job in a private company in Bangalore. So the author's other friend Shiv Shankar uh, has studied in Harvard University in the US, and he studied business management, and he holds a big job in a private company in Bangalore. He earns 15 times the salary of Rangaswamy. So if Rangaswamy used to earn 5,000, um, Shiv Shankar earns 75,000. The three of us get together once in a way in the evening. Shiv Shankar comes from a highly respected Tamil Iyer family in Bangalore. He is a sophisticated man with an interest in literature, music, and culture. He keenly looks through my latest acquisition of English books every time he comes here. So, the author, that is Dr. D.R. Nagaraj, has a large collection of English books, and whenever Shiv Shankar comes to his home, he looks through the section of English books that the author has got. He gets so absorbed in them that he forgets even the glass in his hand. So once Shiv Shankar starts reading in the books or English books of the author, he forgets that he's holding a glass of coffee in his hand. He's so absorbed in the book. But it's my collection of Kannada books that inspire my other friend Rangaswamy. Rangaswamy is inspired by the author's Kannada books. He made every page of Kannada literary journals as if they were bearers of some ultimate truth. So Rangaswamy reads every page of Kannada literary journals as though they hold the key to the absolute truth. He discusses them passionately. Whatever be the other differences, there is one similarity between the high flying Shiv Shankar and the humble Rangaswamy. So, Shiv Shankar may be rich, Rangaswamy may be not so rich, Shiv Shankar may be upper class, Rangaswamy, whatever the other differences, there is one similarity between the high flying Shiv Shankar and the humble Rangaswamy. Both are worshippers of the English language, but Shiv Shankar's sophisticated arguments come loaded with concern for the nation and not just for his own family and friends. Shiv Shankar's comments on English come loaded with concern for the whole nation. He has a big view of the influence of English, and it's not just for his family and friends. He describes how English is gaining prominence in the era of science and technology in non English speaking nations like Japan, Korea, Thailand, Germany, and Russia. Rangaswamy nods in agreement. So Shiv Shankar has seen the world. He sees that, he knows that in non English speaking countries like Japan, Korea, Thailand, Germany, and Russia, they're advocating a knowledge of English, they're advocating English education in those countries too. So English has become a global language. And Rangaswamy nods in agreement because he agrees that even he and if not he, his children should learn English. While Rangaswamy puts forward a Shudra theory of social upliftment in favor of English, Shiv Shankar's arguments are transnational. The pro English position of these two people who have nothing else in common explains to me the rush for English schools. So, from the views of his two friends, the author can explain why there's a rush for English schools. We need to think objectively as to who really is the final beneficiary of our English centric system of education. So, who is the final beneficiary of the English centric system of education? This is my understanding of the whole issue. Establishing a singular and universally accepted notion of social progress, as well as the route to be taken to achieve it, is an important method by which upper classes in each society establish their supremacy. So, all the upper classes in every society have an accepted notion of social progress and they have a singular method. It's almost a method which they use to gain supremacy. Those below them accept and tread this route. The rules that bind those who walk the path are accepted by all classes of people. Those who know their way, those who lose their way lag behind as the marathon continues to participate in it with the dedication, with the hope that they may someday march the finishing line. So, this is the game of social acceptance and dominance. Those who never make that, those who never realize that the rules are designed to make them lose. It may be decades before we see that a similar game is being played on the question of English language, the rules of which has been designed by the powerful upper classes in the country. So the rules of English language learning are framed by the powerful upper classes in the country. More importantly, English centric education is working against rural society. So, English centric education, rural people cannot get English centered education. So, it's working against them, which even includes their upper classes. A majority of schools in villages do not have a system in place to teach English. Most teachers there most teachers there are helpless because they do not know English themselves. Only prestigious schools in cities have the infrastructure to teach and learn English. An ordinary child has no access to these schools. The ultimate beneficiaries in the present power structure are the upper class people. But none of these arguments of mine are acceptable to Rangaswamy. He's insistent that the medium of education has to be English, even if it is bad English. Whatever he does, Rangaswamy's son can never learn in a prestigious school in Yalanka. Shivshankar's son is learning in a prestigious school in Yalanka. This is the fundamental rule of the game. But there is no point in stubbornly arguing today that Kannada alone should be the medium of instruction, says the author, Professor D.R. Nagaraj. We need a new policy that blends the natural benefits of learning in Kannada and the social mobility that English brings to us. So, one of the ways in which Kannada and English can be mixed is with Konglish. Konglish is a mixture of Kannada and English where Kannada is used along with English vocabulary to teach a core subject, and people from Karnataka take to Kannada like a duck takes to water. That is the natural benefit of learning in Kannada, and maybe it will help them move upward socially because they also teach English and a core subject. We need a spoken speak. We need a system that teaches good English alongside Kannada. So maybe it's already in place with many of the teachers speaking in Konglish. It is not, if not, my friend Rangaswamy's children and children from our villages will forever lag behind those big schools in big cities. So the author himself advocates that the natural benefits of learning in Kannada with uh, English should be used to teach children in the state. So that is the essay, The Kannada English Combat, by the famous professor uh, D.R. Nagaraj of Bangalore University. Thank you.